Another impeachment. This one submitted by Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on the House floor against Supreme Court Justices Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas. She said in a press release on Wednesday, Congress has a legal, moral, and democratic obligation to impeach. Here she was on the House floor.
Congress has a constitutional and moral obligation to hold these justices accountable, to maintain the integrity of our courts, and to uphold the standards of the judiciary and our institutions. I am here today presenting these articles of impeachment not because I am a Democrat and not because I am blind to its odds in a Republican-led chamber. I present them because it is the right thing to do.
Democrats are putting the Supreme Court at the center of their protect democracy efforts. But is Biden really the president to help progressives with Supreme Court reform? President Biden responded to calls to expand the court, like FDR did, by creating yet another commission and issuing yet another report. As noted by The Nation, Biden tapped nobody who has been on the record in favor of reforming the court, none of the organizers who have built coalitions in support of reform or professors who have written policies or worked with lawmakers outlining ways to fix the court. The commission was set up to do nothing, and its findings accomplished the easy work. Its members found that there were considerable near-term risks to expanding the court and worried that such a move would further politicize the institution and threaten its legitimacy, as if the court that empowers alleged attempted rapists to take away women's rights should be viewed as legitimate by the people. So now, how is it that progressives in Congress who overwhelmingly believe in court reform and even impeachment of Supreme Court members continue to back Biden's reelection efforts? Niall, this is one of the challenges the left is facing right now. They gave Biden, House, Senate, Democrats, right? They gave Democrats a win, and their agenda was not enacted. As you say, Supreme Court reform not considered, the Voting Rights Act, reestablishment, filibuster wasn't busted. The idea of changing the way politics is done to get what they want is not how Biden operates. Very much that idea of centrist, let's bring things back to normal, let's work with the system we have. He's not the guy who brings a knife to the gunfight.
No, he's not. He's an institutionalist, really, and that applies all across the board, whether it's dealings with Congress, dealings with the Supreme Court, or anything else. And, you know, Joe Biden is not left-wing. I mean, I know the right's attack on him is that he's some sort of communist, which is just an absurd attack. He's a mildly centre-left kind of guy, and someone who has always tried to reach across the aisle where possible. That, of course, isn't to the liking of the left or progressives, generally speaking. They would want much more transformative change in American society. Two things. One is, I don't think we can have that discussion without going into his Gaza policy, which has the left, in my view, understandably outraged. But then the other thing, you know, the Supreme Court issue, AOC, of course, it's a free country. She can do what she likes. I've always thought the packing the court argument is pretty weak, because then doesn't the other side then pack the court when they get in? And so you end up, you know, you have a 9-person court now, you have a 13-person court, and then you have a 17-person court. And like 3 decades later, we've like 47 people on the Supreme Court deciding by 2 votes or 1 vote margin, depending on which president or which party was most recently in power. But having said all that, yes, progressives are certainly understandably unhappy with elements of Biden's policy.
No, and it doesn't have to be limited to packing the court, but certainly the idea of making sure that there's oversight. The Supreme Court is the only body that does not, judicial body, that does not have oversight, ethical oversight, or another legal body that will say what you're doing is wrong, right? They really are just a little fiefdom of their own. Their power is what it is, and they have used recent rulings to get more power for themselves, right? To be the ones who decide whether the executive branch should actually do the job of the executive branch, right? They are, and it is a court that has effectively been packed by conservatives, right? Remember, Merrick Garland, before he was Attorney General, was Biden's nominee, and Mitch McConnell, he was Obama's nominee, and Mitch McConnell brought a gun to the fight, right? I mean, like he just bazookaed the whole situation and said, it doesn't matter. I have about a year before the election. We are just not going to allow you to vote on your nominee. One of the things that presidents hold most dear. That is the type of thing that people on the Democratic side want to see.
What?
That type of fighting.
Well, yeah, I mean, so I'm generally speaking reluctant to defend Mitch McConnell, who I think is just broadly
I'm so glad I put you in that position right now.
A rather cynical figure. I mean, that was certainly obstructionist, what he did with Merrick Garland. That doesn't seem quite the same as packing the court to me. I mean, packing the court is to say, we're going to expand the court and throw all our people on and we'll impose a majority. What Mitch McConnell did was a very Mitch McConnell thing, which was invent an argument which he then abandoned later on when Amy Coney Barrett was nominated by Trump in the closing months of his presidency. I think the stronger argument from a liberal or left of centre perspective is the point you raised about ethics concerns and oversight and all of that. Because you do have, in the case of Justice Thomas, for example, someone whose spouse was actively involved in the attempt to overturn the result of the 2020 election. And Justice Thomas then sits on cases that determine various things pertaining to Trump and that effort. That seems obviously problematic, to put it very mildly, and there's no real way to do anything about it.
Well, which is why AOC brought these articles of impeachment to the floor. It is about these ethics violations, that they don't have to recuse themselves, that they are effectively Alito and Thomas. She said they are corrupt because of the amount of money that they've taken from donors, and they don't have this plausible deniability when looking at cases. But again, they're on that side, they're not pretending to have any plausible deniability. They're like, we're going to take what little room we have and run with it. And that's not what is being done by progressives or the left. In fact, there's a eat your own kind of element to this. AOC, who has been, with others in the squad, very vocal about Biden's failures in Gaza, that Biden has been rubber stamping, they called it the bear hug of Netanyahu. The Democratic Socialists now said that they're taking away their endorsement because she wasn't vocal enough against Biden, right? So it's this tension of they want to keep in power what they have. They want to influence the Democratic Party in ways they can, but to do that, they're going to be losing more and more of their principled base. Yeah,
I mean, I think the Gaza argument is really a very difficult one for the left to rebut here, in the sense that their argument, which I've frankly a fair degree of sympathy for, is that it is morally outrageous to lend de facto impunity to Israel in the midst of an assault that has killed about 38,000 people, displaced about 85% of the population, caused enormous suffering. The squad generally says, right, we have a moral imperative to oppose that. It's a genocide in their mind. Why is President Biden supporting it or allowing it to continue? If that is your argument, to then sort of turn around and say, well, he's not as bad as the other guy, or we're going to hold strong for him, while much more centrist members are suggesting there should be a different nominee. That seems a really peculiar position to adopt, because it seems to me the moral weighting of those issues is very, very different, and progressives are on the unprogressive side of it, in a sense.
Well, and Senator Sanders also still with Biden saying that, and they will say that this is as a squad, as the Sanders wing of the party will say that this is because they do not want elites and the big donors who now can hold $90 million hostage. They don't want them to be deciding what's happening in the party. I kind of get that, but again, that is a logistical argument, as opposed to the whole idea of the squad was the holding policy to a set of moral values. Right. And right now, the argument is be realistic. Yeah. Don't hold the moral values. So it's a disconnect, and I can see why they would not want to be talking about Gaza this week, right, especially when President Biden is now insulting Democrats more than he's ever said anything about Netanyahu, right? He's never said as much bad stuff publicly about Netanyahu as he has said now about the media and people of his own party. So yes, it makes sense that someone like AOC would then come forward and try to shift focus onto the Supreme Court.
Yeah, you raised a really important point there, I think, which is this idea that right now, with Biden in crisis, the Squad and progressive like AOC have shifted to this odd position of saying, well, you have to be pragmatic, which is exactly the opposite argument than the one they are more accustomed to making. The one that they are more accustomed to making is, no, that kind of call to pragmatism lowers your horizons, makes the kind of change that is needed less possible, as sort of is used to sort of draw people to this rather mild milquetoast centrism. So to hear that argument coming from their mouths, I think, is very odd.
And I wonder if that is the calculation of what they see happening in their districts, if they really do feel at this point that there's some concessions and things they can get from Biden for the work they're trying to do in Congress for the next 3 to 4 months? Right? Like, what are the concessions you can get at this moment that would actually benefit progressives or the community you advocate for? And we're not seeing that. What we are seeing, though, people in safe Democratic districts have no problem riding this out. It's the members of Congress, like Mickey Sherrill, who was elected in New Jersey. She's a veteran, very much that national security, female congresswoman, and her district was a Republican-leaning district. Those are the ones where it's actually a real contest between Biden and Trump, where you're starting to see members come out saying Trump needs to go, because they're really worried that voter race isn't out there. And ironically, of all of these things, when you look at, you line up all these Democrats, random names against Trump, the one that beats him the most, Michelle Obama.
Right. I mean,
the Draft Michelle campaign.
You know, listen, I have always said Michelle Obama would be a phenomenal candidate, but she has no interest at all in running. I thought in 2016 she was the one person who could have beat Hillary Clinton. I thought she could have beaten Biden for the nomination in 2020, but she has zero interest in doing it. So the Michelle Obama candidacy will, I think, be a fantasy for some time.
Well, I think we do like the idea of giving power to people who aren't necessarily seeking it. And there's a lot of people who really, really want the power of presidency and be able to sit in Congress and make choices for other people. So that's, as again, the power dynamics of progressives will always be fascinating and a mystery.
Absolutely. And we will have more Rising after this.